I've always loved stories, how they can transport you somewhere else, grab you, and even when they end, there's nothing you want more than for them to continue, for there to be more. I've had stories like Terran Resonance, Arcane, and Squid Game Season 1 do this, and I've been thinking about it each and every time. What hooks me? What makes me want it to never end? This is how to make your story addictive in under 7 minutes. Imagine this. You are sitting on a bench behind a grungy store. It sells clunky guns by this man called Buster. He's a kind man, a bit rough around the edges and in appearance, but overall kind. He helped you grow up, taught you about the below, a place where people lived who were deemed to be trash, a place you now live in. Now, let's go back to that bench. You look around and see people, slouched, walking on by, on busy, humid streets. They're cramped and can barely be called urban, made of pieces of scrap. It's loud, and I suppose it's time to do something about it all. It's time to beat the system once and for all. It's time to burn what's above. You see, on this one description and statement alone, you create an entire story, and you've already created questions for the audience. Why is Buster selling goods? What do they eat here? What is the above? Of course, you will automatically assume some of these things, like they obviously eat something low in quality, or that the character doesn't like living here because it's described as humid and barely urban. But overall, you have created a base for people to become intrigued about. You see, this ties into my point. I believe the way your audience is to become addicted to your story is intrigue. It's to create a curiosity that latches itself to their mind and asks questions. Some questions may never be answered, like what happened to that character when the story ended, but that's a good thing. I believe this is why when the questions are answered, like for example in Squid Game Season 3, they completely ruin that. The intrigue has been trampled upon. You've created a perfect conclusion, and sure, that can be a good thing sometimes, but once you answer every question, it does become boring. There's no longer a reason to stay. What do you even ask now? I want to talk more about Squid Game here, because I think it's an excellent example of what not to do with your story. If you have yet to watch Season 3, however, and do not want spoilers, please skip to this time frame. I adored Squid Game Season 1. It hooked me and created a new concept and brought in characters I was genuinely attached to. It set up things well, foreshadowed well, and every major loss felt gut-wrenching. It made me ask questions like, what will Gi-hun actually do when this is all over? How will the guilt actually affect him? Will the money be a constant reminder when everything is finished? It created this in the final moments of Gi-hun fighting and killing his best friend, and even at the start, when I had predicted what was going to happen, I still had questions that made me think of Gi-hun as if he was actually a real person that I wanted to know. It created questions despite me seeing it as predictable, which I found to be enthralling. The shift between this and Season 2 and 3 is astronomical. Gi-hun has no true person to care about, and the frontman that joins in Season 2 is already known to be the frontman to us, the viewer. It's obvious to, or at least should be, to Gi-hun, but despite the turmoil and trauma he was put through in Season 1, he seemed oblivious to this fact, which irritated me and in turn made me feel like I was watching someone who was no longer human, but instead robotic and structured, made into a story that already had an end. I was no longer watching the Gi-hun I knew and had asked questions about in Season 1, and saw as a guilty, broken man. Now I just saw a person who lost their values, even if the show was heavily trying to convince me with the end of Season 2 that he still had them. Season 3 was the biggest shift. I no longer asked any questions. I watched to see what would happen, if I'm being truly honest. I no longer saw Gihun as a person, but rather a puppet. This is how to create disconnect. This is how to drive your audience away and leave them disappointed. Returning to my first statement about what makes a story addicting, it's not just about visuals, plot twists, or even happy endings. It's the questions we leave the viewer with, the bonds we leave them with too. When a viewer relates so hard to a character that they start to feel like a familiar person to them, that's when we hook them and leave an impression, even when the story has concluded. As a creator, I've always wanted the people who engage with my characters and stories to question things, simple things, like their favourite foods, drinks, and places in the world that I've created, because that means they will always have unanswered questions they desire to answer for themselves. These questions are our gift to the viewer, something that allows them to create their most perfect ending and the most perfect version of the character and story that we've created. But the most powerful and most addicting thing isn't necessarily the questions or relatability, it's ourselves. The way we get inspired by stories and media, the way we desire to make something because we got inspired ourselves, the way we craft the perfect version of the things we have watched, read, or played. So, creator, or viewer, or both, I'll leave you with a question. What made you want to create?